Hello, I'm Andrew G. Marshall, and can you get over your partner's affair? The answer to that question is yes, and that is the topic I'm discovering and I'm sharing with you on this Facebook Live. Hello, welcome. And the important thing to say with a Facebook Live is that it's an interactive experience. You can ask me questions. So the first part, I'm going to actually go over some hints and some advice on how to get over your partner's affair. And then I'm going to take as many questions as I can fit into the rest of the broadcast. The whole thing is going to last about 20 minutes. So if you would like some help and advice on how to get over your partner's affair, all you have to do is put a message along the bottom. It'll come up on my screen and I'll answer it. In the meantime, you can actually tell me if you're finding things useful by pressing the like button, and you can just say hello, because it's actually great to have you on board. So, can you get over your partner's affair? The most important thing to say is yes, you can. So the first thing to do is you need to be kind to yourself, because the whole world has completely and utterly changed. Every one of us is holding and carrying around with us 24/7 an affair-enabling advice. It's called a mobile phone. In the past, if you wanted to contact somebody, you had to phone the phone that was on the hall table, or you had to post a letter. Now you can have private means of communication 24/7. So affairs have got easier to have, more people are having affairs, but at the same time, everybody's got far more judgmental about affairs. Everybody has an opinion, and it's normally a very black and white one. So at the very time that it's getting easier to have affairs, we're getting more judgmental, and that means there's so much more pressure on you. So you'll be having all of these I should have, I could have. And what I want you to do is to tell yourself this is all part of the natural process of recovering from affairs. So don't blame yourself, be kind to yourself, and be patient with yourself. It'll take time to do this, but as you'll find out, if you give yourself time, you'll not only recover from the affair, but you'll learn some incredibly important messages and lessons that will completely transform your relationship and your life. So it seems terrible at the moment, and this is going to sound really strange, there are some positives to come out of it. So first of all, be kind to yourself. And the next one, which I cannot stress too many times, is give yourself time. Because it's so painful, we want to get it over as quickly as possible. We want to get to the other side of the affair as soon as possible. We not only put pressure on ourselves, which makes things worse, but we're likely to do things that we think are going to be a shortcut, but actually are worse for us in the long term. So I think if I can actually explain to you very quickly the 7 stages of recovery, if you understand these, you'll begin to see the amount of time it's going to take to recover from the affair, and you won't put so much pressure on yourself. So what are the 7 stages? The first one is shock and disbelief. How could my partner do something like this to me? It just seems impossible to believe, and that is natural. So don't be surprised. The next stage is intense questioning. There's just so much you want to know, so much you want to understand, and often your partner can't answer those questions or is unwilling to answer them, sort of trying to move over some of the difficult material. But intense questioning is an important and integral part of actually getting over the affair. It's only stage 3 where you should get to decision time and actually say whether you want to actually stay in this relationship or not. Unfortunately, some people say right at the very beginning, okay, yes, I want us to save this relationship. But the thing is, until you've actually got over the shock and disbelief, you don't really know what it is you truly want. Until you've gone through the intense questioning and you actually know everything, do you really want to be with this partner? And if you actually say, yep, I forgive you, let's move on, too soon, there's no incentive for him or her to answer your questions correctly. So the decision time comes around stage number 3. Stage number 4 is hope. You actually think it might be possible to do something positive with this relationship into the future. But that's not the end of the journey. It's a very good place and everybody wants to stay there, but you can't stay there. You move into what I call attempted normality. Now, in attempted normality, you sort of try and carry on with your everyday life. You've got over the initial crisis, but actually your relationship isn't okay. It's on very shaky ground. Lots of people call this stage to me playing happy families. And you know, it's okay to play happy families from time to time, but you don't want to spend the rest of your life doing that. Unfortunately, often the person who's been discovered having the affair sort of wants to stay in this attempted normality. They want to believe that we're over all of the hard stuff. Unfortunately, you come on to the next stage, which I call despair, bodies floating to the surface. Those issues that you've tried to ignore for many years, like he doesn't like your mother or you earn more than he does, actually come to the surface and have to be dealt with. Now, I call this stage despair because you think, oh my gosh, we've not only got an affair, but we've got to deal with all of these nasty things that we sort of always known as there, but we'd rather tiptoe around. Well, for you, it's going to seem really difficult and really horrible, but from where I'm sitting as a therapist, this is actually really positive because once these issues come up to the surface, they can finally be dealt with. Often, when other couples who are not dealing with infidelity come to me, they skirt round these issues and therefore they don't get as much benefit out of the whole process as couples dealing with infidelity. Because the infidelity couples are prepared to go and actually not just push the bodies back down, but to exhume them, look at them and give them a proper burial. And that's what's actually so positive about affairs. I told you there were going to be some positives because it can truly be a turning point in your life where all of the things that have been covered over for many, many years and just been sort of avoided are finally dealt with. And we then come on to the next stage and the final stage, which is intense learning, where you actually transform your relationship. If you want to know more about those 7 stages, I actually cover them in another video that you'll find on YouTube and on my website, so you might like to look at that. So be kind to yourself, give yourself time, and we move on to the next stage, which is expect setbacks. There will be setbacks. In an ideal world, your partner will be terribly cooperative, will answer your questions, will do full disclosure, and will no longer contact the affair partner. I'd like to think this ideal world exists, and I'm sure there are people who go through this, but your partner will hold back information. Your partner will get calls from the affair partner not to tell you about them. They will, in a weak moment after you've had a terrible argument and you've threatened to never ever speak to them again, they will contact the affair partner to say, how are you doing? There will be setbacks. You will fall back down the recovery place, but you will come back up again. But if you think it's a catastrophe, if you think it's the end of the world, it becomes the end of the world. If you're prepared for the fact that there will be setbacks, they will be painful, but they will not be the end of the world. The next thing you need to do when you're recovering from an affair, excuse me while I have some coffee, is to understand why he or she cheated, and for your partner to understand, why did I cheat? These are incredibly important, and I will explain why in just a second. But unfortunately, lots of people jump to conclusions. They think that the reason why their partners had this affair is because they truly loved her or him. And your partner will say these things, but it's seldom that. They will say there is something wrong with you because you didn't initiate enough in bed or whatever. And actually it's seldom those. And you often think it's because your partner is bad or there is something fundamentally wrong with them. And it's seldom that as well. Let's look at why someone cheats. And generally, it's a combination of several things. I put it into an equation, and that is a problem plus poor communication plus temptation equals an affair. Let me give you that again. A problem plus poor communication plus temptation equals an affair. Now, sometimes the problems are things that go way back into the past. Sometimes people have been trained from early childhood to be people pleasers, to try and fit in and give people what they want. It probably starts with their mother and father. And these people superficially make the most wonderful partners because they try and make you happy. And that is brilliant. But it comes at a cost. Sometimes they do exactly what you want. And you don't realise that actually they don't want to go and visit your mother every third weekend, that they're actually really angry about it. But because they don't say anything, that nothing can actually be done about it. So we have that problem, the poor communication. They might not never have learnt to listen. Or it could be that you actually find conflict very difficult, so you push it under the carpet. When it comes to communication, that is a joint thing. The problem is often a problem that belongs to the partner. It can be something that belongs to both of you, but the fact that you can't talk about it is something to do with the poor communication. The temptation, that's nothing to do with you. It's not your job to try and keep your partner away from temptation. That's his or her responsibility. So, as you can see, often these problems go all the way back to your partner's childhood. They go right deep into how the two of you communicate. It takes time to solve these. These are deep, fundamental issues. So what you can't have is your old relationship back. But actually, you don't want your old relationship back because that one got you to this place. But you can have a new one. You can have a much better and more connected one, because not only are you going to come back together, if you are going to, but you're going to have an entirely different relationship. It's why often the people who arrive the most miserable in my counselling room are when one person's had an affair, and the ones that leave the happiest are the ones that have had an affair, because they do all of this difficult work. So remember, this is a Facebook Live. If you've got a question about how to recover from an affair, now is a good time to start asking it, because I'm going to be starting taking questions in a moment. I've got one big tip that I want you to take away as well, and that is about trust. A lot of people come to me and say, I can't trust my partner because he's had or she's had an affair, and therefore I'm stuck. And I always say, thank goodness you can't trust your partner, because in my experience, most people who've had affairs actually at the very beginning are not very trustworthy. They say, oh, I'm not contacting the other person. I've never contacted the other person. But the other person is contacting them. And they think that's true. So you can't trust them. Trust comes much later in the process. So please don't trust them. It's okay to be hyper alert in the beginning stages. But as they do the work, they begin to understand why they cheated. They begin to look at the long-term problems. They begin to actually interpret much better the communication and communicate better. You begin to trust the process. You begin to trust that everything that needs to come out is going to come out. You trust that they're going to that they've changed, and then you can begin to trust them. So don't wait for the trust to start doing the work. Trust in the process, do the work, follow through, and then you'll be able to get to the point that you can trust. Now, as you can see, this is going to take a lot of time to do all of this work. And how are you going to get from now to this golden place in the future? Well, that's why I've started my new infidelity training and support group. How does it work? I'll explain right at the very end of the video, but what's actually really important is it has two elements to it. It has training to help you cope in the meantime, so you don't go stark raving mad. And secondly, you get support, not just from me, but from other people going through exactly the same process. And it's a curated space, so there's nobody going, oh, told you so, or you should do this. This is a place with other people who understand the complexities of infidelity because they're going through the very same thing. And I appear on it every week doing broadcasts like this or answering questions. I have also lots of interesting articles from trusted people around the world who've got some really good ideas. People share things that they found helpful. I have 2-minute tips. It's a wonderful community and we'd love to have you in it, and I'll tell you more about it in a moment. So let's have a look at my questions. So my first question is come from somebody who's anonymous, sent by messenger. I think at the moment for me the toughest part is to understand or accept that it has happened. Yeah, that's what I was talking about, the shock and disbelief. And how my husband was able to push us aside just as he'd, let me just look at the rest of that question, just as he didn't even have a particular interest in the other woman, especially since we've been together for 19 years, I think it was. Right, okay. So let me give you some thoughts about this. How does somebody allow themselves to cheat? So this is not why, but how. Let me have a bit more coffee to lubricate my throat. The first one is they change the story they tell themselves. Normally with unhappy events, we look at the circumstances rather than the character. So, for example, in a perfectly okay relationship, if one person doesn't want sex, the other person says, oh, they're tired, or they've got a lot of work on at the moment. So that's circumstances. But when you get into an unhappy relationship, and these have begun to build up, and the person is changing the story they sell themselves, they don't put it down to circumstances, they put it down to character. So, for example, back to the doesn't want sex, it's not that they're tired, it's something about their character. They don't like sex. So let's have another example. They're too busy to welcome me when we come home. If it's down to circumstances, oh, the kids have been playing up today. Once you start changing it to character, it becomes, I come after everybody in the family, I don't count. So we've got this negative story that they're beginning to tell themselves. They're getting really angry. The next thing they do is they compartmentalise. So in compartmentalise, what you do is you put a barrier down the middle, and what happens over here has no effect on what happens over here. So I can flirt with somebody over here because it has no effect over here. And, oh, well, my partner won't like the fact that I'm going for coffee with this person, but because it's happening over here and they're not going to find out about it, it doesn't have any impact over here. And we just build up and up and up all the things that are happening over here and all the emotions that are going up there. And of course, it doesn't happen over here because they'll never find out. Of course they do. You can't compartmentalise your life like that, but that's how partners who are unfaithful start doing it. So they change the story, they compartmentalise, and the next bit is they tell lies to themselves. In fact, they've been telling lies to themselves for years. First of all, I'm not that unhappy. It will get better, even if I don't do anything about it, because Christmas will happen, or the children will go off to school, or they tell those lies. The next lie they tell is, I can do it all on my own. I can solve this problem all on my own. I can solve my life problems all on my own. They can't. I'm afraid this is a lie that men tend to tell themselves. So because I'm a man, I have to solve my problems myself. So this is another lie they tell themselves. And they can't solve it all on their own. And hey presto, along comes Miss or Mrs. Lovely, and she becomes a shoulder to lean on. She will provide them with help and support and be a friend. And that very soon becomes an affair. So how do they do it? They change the story, they compartmentalise, they tell themselves lies, they think they can solve all their problems on their own, they don't ask for help, and then when it gets too much, they get help from the very people who are actually going to destroy their relationship. So let's move on to my next question. Right, the next question is from Jen. What if you feel like you've lost respect for your partner? How do you deal with that if you want to try and save the relationship? If you've lost respect for your partner, that's perfectly okay. I'm not surprised you've lost respect for your partner, but they can win it back. They can win it back by doing the hard work, by being prepared to look deep into themselves, to answer the question, why did I have an affair? To actually be strong enough to face their demons and to stay with the difficult stuff. I always have huge respect for people who can do that, because these lessons go way back to our childhood. And so therefore, I think that you have to respect the fact they're dealing with these childhood issues. They're really deeply ingrained, and yet they're actually working at them. They're answering the tough questions of life that most people distract themselves from or just ignore. So I have huge respect for my clients because they work really hard. And I think if your partner is prepared to work hard and face his demons, then you will gain respect for him. But at the moment, if you haven't got respect for him, that's okay. Don't pressurize yourself. Right, so let's have a look at my next question. Which is from Angela, and she says, is it realistically possible to rebuild trust from an affair in a long distance relationship if they were caught, plus if you share a child together with a gap of being apart for more than a year? Let's go see more of this question. Oh, right. So, long distance relationship. Yep, that is much, much harder to rebuild trust on. But I don't think it is impossible to do the work, particularly if you can get together from time to time and do some work together. I've had people who have been apart for long periods of time in the rebuilding process, and they Skype together, they talk together, they do the sort of things that rebuild trust. They work with a therapist on Skype. I've got several therapists who you can work with on Skype. If you've got a child together, that is much better, because you've got an incentive to work to improve communication between the two of you, because even if you are going to separate, you're still going to be partners together in raising this child. And actually raising a child apart requires even better communication than if you're in the same room together, because the minute you start doing it over texts, the chances for misinformation grow dramatically. So what I would say is the communication, which is vital for recovering from an affair, is more likely to happen if you've got a child together. They've got more in it. The fact that it's been more than a year apart, that can also sometimes be beneficial. You're actually over the shock. You're beginning to deal with some of the disappointments. It's not quite so raw. It's a case of, are you willing to do it? Is he willing to do it? Are you willing to actually start the process? Actually starting the process is difficult enough. So I don't think you can actually have a situation where X, Y, Z, therefore you can't do it. It's very much down to how committed you are to the process and how committed your partner is to the process. Sometimes at the very beginning, it tends to waver between the two of you. At some points you're committed, at some points he's committed. But as long as one of you is committed, as long as one of you don't want to give up and you still keep doing the work, go through the process, it's not over until it's over. I hope that's helpful. I've got time for just one more question. So this one is from Sammy. How can you move forward from the hurt? I think I'm getting somewhere, then something happens and I'm back at the beginning and feel like I can't cope. Crying, hurt, anger seem part of my life. And I did, let me press the button to see the rest of that. I'm not going to get the rest of it. Never mind. I think I've got enough of the question there. How can you move forward from the hurt? I wish there was an easy way over the hurt. What I would say is the first thing is accept the hurt. Don't say, I've got to get further forward. Don't say, oh, I was much better yesterday and I'm feeling really bad today. That is a natural part of the process. You go forward and you go back. As I always say, accept the feelings, but I have a second part to it, and that is challenge the thoughts. So you accept the feelings, I'm really hurt, but you actually challenge the thoughts. Write down what those thoughts are. So the thoughts like, oh, there's been a message from the other woman, we're never going to get rid of her. Challenge that thought. We're never going to get rid of her. She's still going to be contacting you as you're on your deathbed. I think not. What you mean is it's going to be a long time until we get rid of her. And even just that very slight change brings down the level of despair just a couple of notches. And so if you accept the feelings and you challenge the thoughts, that will make it a little bit more bearable. And the other thing I would say is get support, so that when you're feeling low, you don't have to always go to your partner to try and big you up and make you feel better and reassure you, because they're not always capable of doing that. You come into the support group, you say, I've had a really tough day because ABC has happened. And you post that on, and you'll find lots of other people will understand that because they've had tough days like that, and they will say, let me give you a virtual hug. You watch one of my videos that I've got inside, perhaps one of my infidelity survival trainings. You look at one of these kind of Facebook Live events and you remember that this is something that is transitory. These feelings do not last forever. You're going to feel not better, but 20 minutes time the kids are going to come home and you're going to feel marginally okay. That the support of the group can actually help you get through all of this tough time. So let me tell you about the group. It's a Facebook secret group, and a secret group means, unlike this particular one, if you post stuff, it doesn't go onto your main Facebook feed. Nobody knows you're in the group beyond the other people in the group. Everything that happens is completely contained in the group. It is 100% secret. And everybody who enters signs a confidentiality agreement that they will not disclose information in the group. It's moderated so that it's kept a safe space, and so there is no bullying and there's no telling each other what to do, because everybody's case is different, everybody's situation is different, and what we're there to do is to support each other. You get help and access to me, like in this particular thing, every week, and I've got all sorts of help and advice, and you've got all of the back episodes of these to look at and to get some information and some help and support from. If you want to find out more, if you go to my website, you will find out lots and lots of information. If you don't know what it is, it's www.andrewgmarshall.com. Yes, there is a cost for joining it because it costs me to run it, and I have to charge for my time. But it is, in comparison with seeing me for an hour, incredibly worthwhile, because it's basically with the around the same price as seeing me for an hour in London and having a year's worth of support and access through these kind of events are more or less the same price. So I think it's competitively priced. If you are not entirely satisfied at the end of 30 days, we give you your money back. So I do hope that you'd like to join us in the group. They are an absolutely smashing group of people. They really are absolutely superb. I'm so proud of each and every one of them and how much they're supporting each other. And I'd love you to be a member of the group. As I say, if you want to find out more, go to www.andrewgmarshall.com and we'll be speaking to each other again on these special events. In fact, I've got one coming up in a couple of days' time. So join now and take part in the next one. Until the next time I see you, either in the group or outside in the regular Facebook world, bye-bye, and I look forward to seeing you soon.